Dealing with difficult people in the workplace.
Welcome to Business Matters, a presentation of the Chamber Coalition, which comprises the New American Chamber of Commerce, the African American International Chamber of Commerce, and the Hispanic American International Chamber of Commerce. To become a chamber member, be a guest, or register for our events, go to www.nacc.nyc. That's www.nacc.nyc, or call us at 718-722-9217. That's 718-722-9217.
How do you handle situations where a colleague's behavior is consistently disruptive or toxic to the work environment? Joining us today to discuss this difficult but necessary topic is Judith Belmont of Belmont Wellness. Ms. Belmont is a mental health author and motivational speaker on various personal, emotional, and workplace wellness topics and has 40 years of experience working as a psychotherapist. Welcome, Ms. Belmont. Such a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. So, how do you define a difficult person in the workplace? Can you give examples of behaviors or traits that make one difficult to work with?
People who are negative, people who complain a lot but don't have solutions, people who talk behind people's backs, people who are aggressive and have poor communication skills and are dismissive and rude to others, people who have aggressive nonverbals such as rolling eyes and body posture that shows that they're not open to healthy communication. People who have grudges, people who talk behind people's backs, I think are a real downer for the workplace.
Okay, so as a professional and having all those years of experience, what strategies do you suggest to maintain professionalism and composure when dealing with challenging individuals?
Well, I would go back to basics of good communication skills. Just because someone is aggressive or rude doesn't mean it's okay for you to be rude also. So at all times, make sure that you have assertive communication. If you don't like the way someone's acting, to be specific about what you don't like. If you say, oh, you're acting like a jerk, then you're being a difficult one too. If you're labeling people, you're being difficult. So the best strategy is to be assertive and use I statements. I don't feel comfortable when you roll your eyes when I talk to you. For instance, would be something that would be specific using an I statement. If you use you statements and say things like, there you go again, and why do you act that way? That's being very rude. A lot of people don't realize they're often the difficult ones because they actually are being aggressive and don't even realize it. When I do webinars, and I do webinars on dealing with difficult people for training.com, I am amazed when I ask, and also if I do a live audience, do you think I have a role play when I'm very aggressive and I say, what do you think I am? And people in the chat box put if I was assertive, non-assertive, and aggressive. Most people, even when I explain the differences, they think that I'm being assertive when I'm actually doing a lot of you statements that I'm actually very rude. So a lot of times it's very hard to pinpoint what really is. So I like to have guidelines of what is assertive and what is aggressive, because a lot of times people don't realize how aggressive they are. They think if they don't raise their voice, they're not yelling or they're not being aggressive. But you could yell quietly and you could give someone the cold shoulder, and you can be very discounting in your nonverbals.
Yeah, that all these are excellent observations and points. So, in your opinion, what are the most common reasons behind workplace conflicts and how can they be prevented or mitigated?
Well, a lot of people carry their own stuff to the workplace. Maybe they're unhappy at home. maybe they've had unhappiness in their, their own backgrounds, and they have learned certain ways to communicate that are frankly toxic. I have never yet, in my 45 years of being a therapist, and now I'm a mental health coach online, I've never met someone who tried to be dysfunctional. I never met anybody who tried to be toxic in the workplace, although a lot of people actually had a lot of toxic behaviors. They just didn't know any better. They were not educated. And that's why it's so important to have some training on good communication skills and how to handle conflict in a way that is not just uh, increasing it.
And you mentioned about handling conflict. So how can one handle situations where a colleague's behavior is consistently disruptive or toxic to the work environment? So it's not something that happens every now and then, it's something that is continual.
Well, whether it's happened now and again or continual, it needs to be addressed because toxic behavior is a real energy drain on the workplace. And it really leads to low morale, lower productivity. People are going to have more mental health issues such as stress and difficulty sleeping and eating. So it takes a toll, even if it's not like a constant thing. There's often just a fear of the other shoe dropping. So the most important thing is to make sure your workplace has some way that people can give feedback without having any consequences. Because a lot of times people don't complain about people because they don't want to be quote complainers. But if there's legitimate issues that you are feeling very uncomfortable, it's important to find someone you can talk to, whether it's HR at a bigger place or your supervisor or your coworker if it's in a smaller place.
I was just going to ask you about if it's a small office, how do you handle that? And you answered that.
I
So,
think the most important thing is to be specific. When people uh, address problems, they often label. They say, you're acting like a jerk to them, or you're being lazy, or they label and they end up being difficult themselves. Be very specific, saying, for instance, in the last 3 days, you've been late from lunch twice, and that put more of a toll on me. And being specific is a way of not being judgmental or rude, but it's being matter of fact about it.
okay, so what steps can one take to establish boundaries with difficult coworkers while still maintaining a productive professional working relationship?
First thing, I would address people directly. And if that doesn't work, because some people, it's hard to communicate with someone who is not a good communicator and is very negative. Then you need to talk to a coworker, a supervisor, and but talk to a coworker not in terms of complaining, but enlisting support. I'm having a hard time with the way I feel when that person does that. Now, but you also need to take responsibility for your feelings. If you say, she makes me so mad, you're also the difficult one because no one can actually make you mad. You are mad in response to what they are doing. So make sure you're thinking clearly and communicating clearly. And if you are the supervisor of someone who is toxic, then you have more clout. You can have a productive performance appraisal and have a written contract that in the next 30 days, this is the behavior I want to see, and be very specific. And if that person can't do that, then you have the ability to decide what the consequences will be if this is your employee.
So, Ms. Belmont, you mentioned supervisors. How can one approach conflicts with supervisors or authority figures in the workplace, especially when their actions or decisions are causing tension or difficulty for one or the team?
That's a real problem because a lot of times people fear retaliation. They feel that if they say something and it's their supervisor, but their supervisor might be bossy. For instance, Some supervisors are authoritative. Ative means tending towards, it means that they have flexibility. Some supervisors are authoritarian. Arian means having the occupation of. So if someone is rigid and more bossy, they think, well, I can be bossy because I'm the boss. It's sort of like a parent telling their kid because I said so. It's actually very authoritarian and very rude. So it's very important to be able to talk to someone, but if that's a person that you feel like is not respectful of you, you could let them know that. I don't feel respected when you tell me because I said so. I don't feel respected when this. So you basically describe with I statements, I feel this way when this happens, rather than you make me nervous. If you do that, you're not going to be effective. But a lot of people, they don't know the difference. They don't realize they're being aggressive. And therefore, it's important to separate your thoughts from your feelings and realize you own your feelings, not anybody else.
Okay, so looking at empathy and understanding, what role do you think empathy and understanding play in resolving conflicts with difficult coworkers? And can one demonstrate these qualities in the interactions?
I think empathy is super important, and empathy is one of the characteristics of the most effective leader and actually an effective human being. People who are empathetic don't necessarily know what someone's going through, but they try to understand and they show that they are not judgmental. The best people to be around are people that accept you the way that you are. However, there still can be limits and consequences if you don't are not acting up to par. But empathy shows that people care about you, whether it's your supervisor, clients, coworkers, as a person. And it's a very important skill. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have it because a lot of people were not actually treated with empathy in their own lives. And they don't actually know how to do it. It might seem like a very obvious skill, but it's a real reach for someone who has a lot of bitterness, has a lack of forgiveness for others, and have had some trauma in their own life.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier how a toxic work environment can affect one's sleep and eating habits. So how can one prioritize self-care and maintain their own well-being when dealing with challenging situations or individuals in the workplace?
That's an excellent question because a lot of people find that when they're in a toxic workplace, their self-care goes downhill because they're feeling so stressed out and they're thinking a lot of you statements. They're thinking, that person's making me feel that way. That person's making me do this. And so self-care is giving yourself the power that you might not be able to change a situation, but you can change the way you react to the situation. We have 100% ability to change the way we react. And one of the ways of reacting is to take better care of yourself in times of stress, to make sure you take your vacations, to make sure you take, some vacation days off so that you can regroup, to make sure you have someone you can talk to about some of the things you're going through. Some of the things you're going through, let's say in a toxic workplace, might trigger some of the old hurts of the old themes in your life with relationships. So self-care is really important. And there's a lot of ways to take care of yourself. Physical self-care, mental self-care, spiritual self-care. Some of my books, because I'm a mental health author, and some of my books have to do with how to take care of yourself so that you can be stronger in the midst of difficulty.
Okay,
Because stress isn't always bad for us. Stress can be very good if we manage it instead of just carrying it. We can be challenged by it. We can learn from it. We can grow from it. So self-care gives us the tools to make us more resilient.
And Ms. Belmont, in your experience, what are some effective strategies for fostering a positive and respectful work environment, even in the face of difficult personalities and all that we've discussed previously?
Well, I think again, going to trainings or reading about how to be more assertive is very important. Another thing is to learn skills of how to be more positive and optimistic. And that would be under cognitive behavior psychology. Cognitive behavior psychology basically says you are what you think. And there's a type of therapy called cognitive behavior therapy. So most of my books focus a lot on what's called CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, separating your thoughts from your feelings and feeling more empowered, even in a toxic workplace. So you can recognize your thoughts and make sure they're healthy. For instance, if you say, oh, I can't stand her, your thought is not going to be healthy, and therefore you're going to feel badly. If you're thinking, wow, she's really challenging for me to be around, then you will have more of a sense of empowerment and won't give up your sense of control. So basically focusing on your thoughts to change your feelings. The premise under cognitive behavior psychology is basically that if you have problems, you need to think more clearly, to feel more clearly, to behave more clearly. So that's one way of self-care, is reading up on cognitive behavior psychology and reading some CBT self-help books or self-care books. I have a 5-minute self-care journal where 5 minutes a day, every day you have some dose of self-care, something to help support you in times of difficulty.
So how can one get that journal? How can one get to learn more about you or get in touch with you?
Look on belmontwellness.com. BELMONT is my name, belmontwellness.com. I have a lot of free handouts, and also, obviously I have links to my books. But I have a lot of free handouts on how to be more assertive, how to think more clearly, how to be more forgiving. Because the one thing about a toxic workplace is that people often carry around grudges. And that is so toxic to the workplace. I remember doing a live workshop at one place, and there were 2 coworkers in a very small department. They had not talked to each other in a couple years. And I was amazed that the supervisor would let that happen, because there's no place for that type of thing in the workplace.
Exactly. So thank you so much, Ms. Belmont. Judith
Thank you
Belmont.
for having me.
You're very welcome. And once again, if you want to get more information, get some of those free resources, get one of her books or all of her books, you go to belmontwellness.com. That's BELMONTWELLNES.com. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate you taking time out to talk to me.
You're so very welcome.
You are invited to the Chamber Coalition Small Business Sense Bootcamp. Join our 5-session webinar series where we provide education and business preparation for small business owners and startups. Learn the basics of business planning, how to finance your business alternatives and your credit as an asset, marketing and social media strategies, small business solutions, legal, tax, accounting, banking, and insurance, and how to do business with the government and corporations. Register at startupsbootcamp.eventbrite.com.